All right, moving on to section 1.4, box plots and histograms. Continuing with data and displays. We got some other displays to look at here today. Your last video was really long, so this one I'm not going to spend nearly as much time on. So let's take a look at some vocabulary that we've already learned, however. So first we have range. Just remember that range is your maximum minus your minimum. So it's that distance between those two endpoints in your data set. Your IQR, or your interquartile range, is just going to be the difference then between those two quartiles, your third and your first. It's sort of like another maximum and minimum. So distance between your third quartile and your first quartile. And finally, we have outliers as well. So this is something we haven't talked about yet. How do we find out if something is actually an outlier? There's this formula we use to see if a data point is an outlier. We know that an outlier looks like something that is much different from the rest of the data. It's either way below or way above the data set, right? That's an outlier. But we can actually see mathematically if something is an outlier by taking 1.5 times your interquartile range. So once you find that interquartile range, right, you're going to take that and you're going to multiply it by 1.5, and you're going to add your third quartile, okay? Or you can do it like this. You can take 1.5 times your interquartile range and subtract your first quartile. So that's a mathematic way to find out whether or not a value is actually an outlier. Please make sure you have that particular formula written in your notebook so that you can find outliers. Okay, and deviation is something we talked about in our last video. Deviation is just how far from center a data point is. So it tells us how far one data point is from the mean. Okay, so that's a deviation. And again, you'll remember that from your last video. All right, so moving on to histograms, and you've probably looked at these before, but we're going to take a look at it anyway. So there's a difference between a bar graph and a histogram in a couple of ways. Okay, on the left we have a bar graph, right? Marker's not writing at the moment. All right, so we're going to go with it. My marker's not writing, so let's just do this anyway. So on the left-hand side we have a bar graph. A bar graph has spaces in between the bars, right? And it has very particular categories, and each bar is one category. So there's a bar graph. Spaces between the bars. Each bar represents one particular category or value. Now, if you take a look at a histogram here on the right, we have no gaps between our bars, all right, and they're not actually called bars this time, they're called bins, but we'll see that in a second. So no gaps between those bins. And then if you look at your horizontal axis, we have number ranges. So each bin or each bar is a certain range of numbers. So that first bin is any value in that data set that's between 100 and 150. So there are a lot of different values in that one bin. We're going to practice that in class. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple other things. All right, so some of the vocabulary. A bin. What is a bin? I'm going to do this the best I can here on my computer with my marker. So a bin is your range of values from your data set. Okay, one bin represents a range of values. I know this is really messy. That's because I'm doing it on my computer. So it's a range of values. Okay, and what is bin width? Your bin width is the actual range. So, look like a kindergartner writing here. That's the range of values. And what is a bin width? If I go back to my last image, you'll see that the bin width for, let's see. Right, you'll see that the bin width for this particular histogram here on the right is between 100 and 150. So the bin width is 50. So the bin width is just kind of your minimum and your maximum for that bin. It's the range in that bin. So the bin width here is going to be 50. And so there's your bin width. Okay? So this is called a bin. And your bin width is how big is that bin. Okay. So we'll say how big is the bin? My marker is all of a sudden writing again, so we're just going to go with it. All right, we're going to stop there for now. That's really all we're going to do for this particular video, and we will practice more of this in class, creating histograms by hand and collecting the data in order to do that.